Good afternoon. We are about to share with you another episode of Dancing with Change in Facility Management. And this episode, we are having a chat with Brent Ward, who is a facility management expert in Washington. So, Brent, tell us a bit about you and your background.
I've been in the facilities arena since about 2007, mostly in the education sector, but also in banking and medical laboratories. Um, Currently, as of about a year and 4 months ago, I started my own consulting firm, consulting with various companies on all things related to facilities. I'm currently on the board as vice president of the Oregon Southwest Washington chapter of IFMA, and I'm also the vice president of the IFMA Facilities Management Nonprofit Council. I was raised in a construction family. I was running front end loaders on my uncle's sites at 10 years old back in the day when that was a legal thing to do and nobody cared. Um, I've owned my own painting company for several years, worked in the insurance industry for a brief deal, and then landed in facilities in 2007. And here I am.
That is great. I have a sense, given that very varied background and time that you've been in this business, that you are actually witnessing a lot of change, and
Yes.
perhaps even more so these days as things are certainly changing. So, what are you seeing out there that you'd like to share with this audience?
Well, You know, energy management has become really a key issue for people today. Not only are they concerned about the rising prices of energy and that affecting them, but a lot of governments are mandating specific energy use indexes that corporations, companies, uh, commercial buildings have to meet. And so they have to find ways to manage their energy and yet still conduct business. Um, and that's in some ways can be perplexing, especially if you're a manufacturing facility that is a high energy user to try to figure that out. And so working with companies to meter their big energy use sections of a building or pieces of equipment in a building so that we can get a better idea on where the energy is going so that we can manage it and see how it can be better used. Of course, HVAC systems are probably in most buildings, with the possible exception of manufacturing, the single biggest user of energy in the building. So managing those systems is critical. And there's a lot of new technology out there to help us with that.
Yeah, let's explore the technology for sure, because you're right. Technology is changing at a fast pace,
Mm-hmm.
and technology itself is actually, you know, a concern of energy use and how and where and how much actually is influenced by energy too. So tell us about that.
Well, you know, there's there's a lot of pieces out there, but there are a few what I consider complete pies, if you will, that do a lot of energy management as opposed to a piece. For example, I've been talking with a company who has a device that will bring in the weather report and look at outdoor data and to a point manage your HVAC system. For instance, one of the things that they push in areas like the Pacific Northwest, of course, right now, Los Angeles, and that is forest fires. Um, and that is their system will monitor everything based on weather and wind patterns that are currently going on. And in your commercial building, what it will do is it will say, all right, well, the wind just shifted. So the smoke's going to be blowing right over your building in about 2 hours.
Wow.
So what it does is it says we will purge the air in your building. We'll open up all the outside dampers to full. We will increase fan speed and we will purge your building of all of the air that's in there now and get your building as clean as possible. And then roughly 30 minutes before the wind brings the smoke here, we will shut everything up tight, close the outside air dampers, turn on internal HEPA filters, and keep the occupants safe.
That's wild. I mean, that's
So
amazing.
that is amazing. But again, that's a little piece of the HVAC puzzle
Yeah.
as far as reducing energy. Then there's other companies I've been talking with out there who do similar things with weather. If you have a huge rain event, then they will do things to mitigate humidity through their technology, which is a great thing in an office environment. Humidity can ruin printers, copiers, and that sort of thing, and running paper through it. But they will also do things like um, lower the blinds as the sun goes around a building so that it mitigates the effect of the sun on heating the building to keep HVAC costs lower.
Mhm.
Um, it will increase and decrease outside air based on CO2 sensors around the building. Uh, and of course, everybody's aware of, you can zone your building so that, if there's nobody in the conference room, the HVAC drops back to night set points and doesn't use as much energy. And if it's scheduled, then it'll get it to temperature in time for the next meeting. Or if somebody just walks in there, it'll determine based on how long they're in there and how many are in there, and if it needs to kick on and adjust. So those are things that are being done with the HVAC system. There are some systems out there that have included, they call it AI. I think it's more machine learning, where it will learn patterns and it will adjust what it does to heat and cool an area based on the patterns that it learns over time.
Well, that would be
So,
interesting too. Like, I'm just thinking with the rapid change of climate, weather, and areas and so on, that could be a lot of change or a lot of patterns that the
mhm,
technology has to keep learning just simply
mhm.
because I'm not sure that it's all as you know the same as it might be for a period of time. Like I think that there's a lot of changing, but I mean, if the
I would
technology
agree.
can pick up those changes and adjust that quickly, then that's quite
Mhm.
helpful.
Yeah, there's I agree with that with the work from home and people coming to the office in some areas, some companies, as they will, it makes it that much more difficult to determine a pattern because people aren't coming and going at a regular frequency.
Right?
But there is one system out there that was designed for the hybrid workforce.
Okay.
And what it does is it takes multiple factors like weather, like um, conference rooms that have been booked, desks that have been booked through their hoteling system, and it says, well, it's going to be 116 degrees today, and we've already got 97 people, whatever the numbers are, in scheduled to be in this office. Based on the weather, to optimize the HVAC and minimize energy usage, we will no longer accept reservations for conference rooms or desks. We cannot let any more people in the building.
Interesting. Hmm.
And so it will shut down the hoteling operations and no one else could schedule time in the building that day.
Wow.
Um, it also, based on weather forecasts and things, can predict that in advance. So maybe tomorrow is going to be a bad day. And so it shuts down hoteling tomorrow
Hmm.
so that it limits, and that way it can mitigate your HVAC runtime and therefore your energy usage.
So now, knowing that level of detail that it picks up on, if an organization determines that they actually want to increase their protection against heat, cold, heat loss, and so on, and upgrade their insulation and or resealing the building and so on, how do they map into this effort, this technology, so that it learns about these new features in a building?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how they can tell it that they have
They'd have to
increased that.
recalibrate it, maybe.
I think that that's probably what, because there are standards. I mean, if you go from an R12 to an R16, it's pretty much known what your decreased heat load or increased cool load is going to be.
Right.
And you can go in and probably change the algorithms within this machine learning piece
Okay.
that says, we are not going to need as much cooling power based on these new calculations, and here's what they are, and give it that heads up. Now it's still going to have to learn based on history, it'll adjust, but if you can give it that heads up, it'll be more accurate sooner.
So I'm thinking along that line that there's a number of sensors involved in actually picking up this information and monitoring different heat, colds, wet, dry scenarios. So,
Yeah,
and given that we're in facility management, what is the maintenance of these sensors like, and what's the life cycle of these sensors? Or do we have enough actual information that we know that?
well, it's interesting you raised that question, because I raised that to somebody I was talking to the other day, because I said, the last thing I want to do is walk into a conference room, and feel like everything is watching me, that there's 25 sensors up in the room. There's one for temperature, there's one for CO2, there's one for humidity, there's one for light, and he said, no, we have one sensor, does all of that.
Okay.
And get this, they are a lighting manufacturer. So it comes with their 2x4 fluorescent drop-ins.
Interesting.
So you can hook their sensor. Now they use the sensor for light harvesting to adjust the level of lights, which is energy savings as well, so that the lights dim as if the sun's brighter on a cloudy day, the lights are brighter, instead of just at a constant level. But their sensor picks up humidity. It'll pick up motion, so it keeps the lights on if people are in the room. It's infrared, so if there's heat in the room from a body, it'll keep the lights on. And that heat in the room also is occupancy sensor, tells them the room is occupied. All of that can be tied into the HVAC system or the building control system, so that the building control system uses that very same sensor that's in every light in the room to tell the building control system what that room is like, not just from one point from one thermostat on the wall, but from all of the points and all of the lights. It averages that and gives you a much better comfort level in the room.
So I'm just featuring, a bit of maintenance in a school, for instance, over the summer holidays and changing out of light fixtures. So along with that, perhaps all this, well, if the sensors are part of the light fixtures, then they too get changed as a
Mm-hmm.
matter of
Mm-hmm.
course then.
Yep.
So is this adding more, this particular technology change, which has tons of benefits, is it adding more work to facility managers, or is it adding work in some instances, but lessening work in others?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it is. It is allowing machine learning to take all of that data and take the onus of comfort in the building away from the facility manager, because machine learning will theoretically, and it has proven in most cases, once it learns that it will do so, that it will maintain that room at a better temperature than the facilities manager can, because he's going to set it and forget it. Whereas in some of these cases, literally, the occupant of the office can set his own temperature.
Hmm.
and those sensors will keep his room at the temperature that he or she desires. That makes occupants happy
Wow.
because some of us like it 68 and others like it 74.
I
And
suppose
if
that's
the FM keeps temperatures throughout the building at 72, nobody's happy.
yes, I suppose that speaks to an interior with separate offices, perhaps
Mm-hmm,
less so with a larger open office. Which brings me
mm-hmm,
to another question about energy management for sure. But how do how are these sensors and the equipment that allows them to pick things up? How's that dealt with in the case of reconfiguration of interior space, whether it's move, adds, changes, or whether it's
mm-hmm,
a, a renovation? And
mm-hmm.
how challenging then is that to?
It's it's actually very simple.
Okay,
There's an app for that.
of course.
And literally there's an app. So you pull out your iPad and you pull up the app and it has your floor plate or your floor plan and it has all of your lights. And you simply can go, all right, well, if you're going to do a full remodel, let's say you go in there and you touch every single light and you say, okay, now you're all grouped as one. Every light on this floor is one right now. During the remodel, you're all one. One light comes on, you all come on because we need you for construction. Then when the project is done, you go back in and you overlay the new floor plan on your iPad and you go, okay, so touch, 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 touch those four lights in this office, you're on this switch. And they put a switch in that office.
Hmm.
And then you go out into the open area and you go, let's see, these lights here, and you touch all the lights on your iPad in that area, and they're on this switch or on this circuit as far as the software is concerned. There really don't need to be switches because they
Yeah,
all sense
wired
motion
into
and turn
the,
on, right? So
yeah.
yeah, so you just go back and reconfigure and you can put as many lights as if you get somebody in an office who's light sensitive and they don't want all four 2x4s on in their office, they only want two of them on, then you can go onto your iPad and go, okay, you two stay off, you two function.
That's handy. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. For people that are neurodivergent and have areas that are they're sensitive to, it is convenient.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with this change in sensors, which is really good, and particularly monitoring energy consumption, which is required, does that also tie in then with different types of heating systems, cooling systems, and so on? Like for instance, if a building has decided to switch from, I don't know, gas powered to geothermal or something like that. How does the equipment to actually monitor and manage it get mapped into the new source of heating or cooling?
Um, yeah, that's a pretty big project to change from well, gas to electric's not as big of a deal, but geothermal
Yeah.
requires a whole different is a whole different world. They probably would have to build a small, unless they got a bunch of room in the basement, a small building adjacent to put the equipment in to be able to operate the geothermal equipment. But as far as operations within the building and controlling temperature, that piece remains the same.
Yeah.
It's just the source changes things. And generally speaking, geothermal is much more affordable
Hmm.
than, using utilities from a utility company, gas or electric. So that would be a huge energy savings if you had the source to
Yeah.
be able to
No,
do
it
that.
would. There's actually well, and it's so dependent on the type of facilities for sure. Like, for instance, um, either schools or universities. Universities more so are on campuses, so they have a lot more land to explore and deal with than, for instance, you know, a school. It
Hmm.
has land as well, usually playgrounds and fields and stuff. And so the opportunity to do that, hospitals likewise have usually a bit more land associated with the buildings themselves, but commercial offices and so on would have less of an opportunity, at least for geothermal, for sure.
Hmm.
So whether they would be looking to solutions for cutting down or changing energy consumption on a rooftop situation and whether that makes sense. Have have you had to deal with any buildings of that nature in terms of changing out, rooftop equipment and placing it into a different.
No, no, everything that I've been involved in replacing has been replacing like for like.
Okay.
Um, it still can be an ordeal because, equipment changes, sizing changes. You've got a well that this unit sits on right now, and technology has shrunk everything, and now you got this great big hole in this little itty bitty unit that you got to deal with.
That's
But
actually a good news story.
yeah, it is. But the new units are so much more efficient than the old ones were, that they can be much smaller than they used to be.
Right. Well, actually, that's such a good point because I think, in my experience, one of the most pressing problems is once a building is handed over to the management team, which I would suggest it's another topic, but I'd like facility managers to be involved right from the design stage.
Hmm.
But, having equipment that requires maintenance being placed in the most obscure places because, equipment isn't as important as occupants, although the two actually, work hand in hand.
Yeah, you
So,
can't have one without the other.
yeah, and so just being able to get at equipment to maintain it, certainly as it shrinks in size, this is good news. And I'm thinking that the ability to monitor and control this equipment with technology also really helps with this challenging problem. But then at some point in time, I mean, there's still filters to be replaced. There's still the mechanical end of mechanical equipment that needs to be maintained, and access to that is really important. So are we seeing any changes around where equipment is being placed just because now we've got technology that helps to run it? Or is it still, tucked away in some ceiling in a corner behind a library of books that you can't get at?
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens. Generally, stuff like that happens, I find, after a remodel, usually in the initial construction phase, because they have the wall layout. They put things where you can get at them, usually. Not always, but usually, because sometimes a contractor will move things without permission, and then it ends up being a real booger. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the ceilings, and a lot of it has to be, especially with technology today and the type of offices that people are wanting to work in with um, common areas and open collaborative areas and little telephone booths, and all of those things have to be heated and cooled in different ways, and that requires a lot of units that are zonal in the ceiling,
Right.
providing heating and cooling to that little telephone booth, or
Yeah.
that two-man conference room, or that eight-man conference room, or that open area with couches and whatever else it is out there. And they all have to be controlled differently. So gone are the days where you just have a great big huge rooftop unit blowing air, and it blows the same air everywhere evenly. It doesn't work that way anymore if you want comfort for the occupants.
Yeah. Another incident, well, it's frequent. And I've actually asked this question to technology providers, but I'm going to ask you whether you've encountered this, and if so, how you've dealt with it. But sensors are sensitive to,
Hmm.
especially when they're in ceiling areas, they're really sensitive to dust and they're sensitive to spiders. Who'd have thunk? But it's not unusual for spiders to set off sensors that are completely unrelated to what the sensors are there for. So I did ask that question to technology provider, and he mentioned that they are aware of that, and they're starting to actually make sensors that are able to withstand or not be bothered by spider webs and such. So, have
Hmm.
you come across any of that?
No, as a matter of fact, I haven't. I haven't heard of any issues with that.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. The only fun time I had with sensors was in a building we had that the lobby was a three-story lobby with a peaked roof,
Okay,
and there was a infrared smoke detection device that ran across the peak from end to end of the peak to detect smoke for fire.
right.
Got woke up about 3 o'clock in the morning because of fire alarm going off, and we're going in there and we're going, why? What is causing this?
Right.
And it's half dark in there. All the lights aren't on. You're not, and we can't figure it out. And finally, I went over and I flipped all the lights on in the lobby and looked up, and there was a balloon had floated from somewhere.
Actually, that is so true. And one thing you just pointed out, which I think is an issue of programming this equipment, because if there is an alarm, undoubtedly it's at 3 in the morning.
Hmm.
So whether that
Yeah.
makes sense, I'm not sure. Whether, well, and I'm thinking this is always good practice anyway, but collaborating closely with our technology partners in this equipment so that it makes sense for how buildings are managed and for what purpose, just so that
Hmm.
we don't have false alarms at
Hmm.
strange times of the morning, that we
Yes.
actually have them when they make sense and they can be attended to and looked at right away. So,
Absolutely. And we have to be smart with our technology. Technology for technology's sake is foolish.
yeah,
Know what you need, know what your company's goals are, know where you're going. Use the technology that will get you there and not just technology for technology's sake. Um,
that is such
you know,
good.
there, there's a lot of cool stuff out there, and we personally might be tech nerds, but that doesn't mean that we need to spend the company's money on a bunch of tech that's just cool and doesn't really serve a purpose that we as a company need. Um, I was just with a fellow FM out at one of his properties, which is um, a medical clinic,
Okay.
and he was telling me that just after they took occupancy, they had in the custodial closet the chemical dispenser got left on.
Yikes.
And it got left on, of course, as they always do on a Friday night.
Of course.
And when they came in on Monday, they lost use of the clinic right next door. They lost use of the conference room and some areas, on the floor below. And I said, "Oh, well, then you need this technology that I was just looking at yesterday." And he goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, there's water flow technology where you put flow sensors online. So you put a flow sensor on every line, every toilet, every sink, every anything that uses water. Put a
Yeah.
flow sensor on it. And you can stop there and it will alarm when it senses flow at, and you can set it. So, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Flow
Hmm.
all you want, you're fine. At 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. if it flows, alarm or whatever you want to do. Says, but then they also go beyond that. They can replace the valves in your water system with Bluetooth valves. And now that flow sensor machine learns and it says, oh, well, this line always is running water from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I won't do anything in those hours. But at 11 o'clock at night, if there's flow in that line, I'm shutting the water valve off. And literally, it will send a signal to the water valve and shuts the water valve off. Think about the damage
Yeah.
that that could prevent with
No
that
kidding.
technology.
Yeah.
And so if you're, in multi-story buildings, that becomes critical.
Hmm. It
Um,
does.
yeah, you get a huge water leak on the 17th floor.
Slows
You
down.
got 17 floors worth of water damage by Monday morning.
That's so true. It's so true. No, that I totally agree that certainly technology is a huge change factor in this field, and I think it continues to be
Hmm.
absolutely, and will continue to be. And I think that as you mentioned, the technology involved in assisting with sustainability issues and buildings and keeping them sustainable is
Hmm.
really important and actually a huge benefit to managing all kinds of different buildings for sure.
Yeah. And it you have to add into that piece that, once you get to this level of sustainability, energy management responsibility, whatever you want to call it, that you still can't just turn around and walk away.
No,
It has to be maintained. Your equipment has to be maintained properly to maintain it in that condition, to maintain it where you have it set. So it's an ongoing process, and you have to determine when you want to upgrade your technology to if you think you can get even more energy savings out of newer technology as it comes along, and it will.
yes. Actually, I think you're making or helping to build a really strong business case for actually getting this kinds of maintenance funded in buildings because the end result is a whole lot of savings not only in energy consumption but in potential damage for systems that just simply weren't attended and for no
Hmm.
other reason than they just failed, right? So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's excellent points for a business case for actually getting this work funded, getting this in
Yeah,
place.
it's kind of a little bit off technology, but I didn't realize until a few weeks ago in talking with a commercial insurer that here in the States, at least, that any building 30 years old or older is going to be high insurance rates unless you can prove you have replaced all your iron pipe water lines with current technology, because iron pipe has a 30-year lifespan and therefore it will start to leak. And at some point, you will have a burst and you will have a water claim, and the insurance insurer does not want to deal with it. So they're going to overcharge you now for rate at rates for when
In
you
anticipation.
have that catastrophic event.
You know what?
So,
That's a brilliant argument again to invite facility managers to be having these discussions with their organizations.
mhm,
I'm not certain that every organization, in fact, I'm fairly certain they're all different, but I really think that it's important for facility management to find a seat at the
yeah,
table with particularly their finance folks because it has huge impact.
mhm,
And I don't know that we talk enough about insurance and
mhm,
the reason for it and
mhm.
how we can actually use it to advantage. So, we could probably have a full conversation just on insurance, tell you the
We
truth.
could. And when you think about replacing iron pipe water lines, remember what else in your building is iron pipe, and
Exactly.
that's your fire sprinkler system.
Yes. We actually had a conversation about that earlier by a supplier, and I think it's such a good, interesting information to dig into and
Hmm.
prepare for. So, yeah, our business case is building for sure.
It is. It
Maybe
is.
that
Yeah.
that needs to be our next conversation, how to put together.
Absolutely. How to get a seat at the table so that you can get everything you need paid for by the CFO, right?
Well, you know, that finance is important to every organization, but finance used wisely becomes a huge advantage too. So
Yeah.
you're right. Let's talk about that.
It sounds good.
Thank you very much, Brett. This has been some
Well,
really
thank
good,
you.
revealing information, actually, that's important to every facility management organization out there because it applies to all kinds of buildings. So pleased to have had this conversation. Pleased to have you share this kind of information with our audience. It's useful. So thank you very much.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.